It is out of place of physical exhaustion that Jesus declares his thirst. The hours spent in the sun, coupled with the physical pain he was feeling, would have created mild, if not severe, dehydration. Jesus speaks of his own thirst out of a real human need for sustenance and relief. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so the soldiers soaked the sponge with it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. The vinegar was a cheap wine that the Roman soldiers drank while waiting for those crucified to die. On the cross, Jesus is physically thirsty. Like Jesus, we should thirst for God's healing and restoring presence in our own pain-racked lives. Our souls are parched and dry for it. If we would only ask, God willingly quenches it, abundantly, fully, now and forever.
"2 p.m., Jesus begins his 6th hour on the cross. In John 19:30 we read, "After receiving the sour wine, Jesus said, 'It is finished.' And then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit, signifying the completion of his work and the fulfillment of his mission." Their center head on the crosses ceased to bob. It yanked itself erect. Its eyes opened in a flash of white. A roar silenced the crowd. "It is finished." It wasn't a wail, it wasn't a scream, it was a roar, a lion's roar. When Jesus said, "It is finished," it was a declaration that the debt owed by man to his Creator is finally and forever paid. Those words also signified the completion of 300 prophecies from the Old Testament, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Malachi. His work of redemption and atonement for humanity's sin is complete, finished, done, signed and sealed because of the blood of Jesus. When Jesus bowed his head, that symbolized his submission to his Father's will, the end of his earthly ministry, and the finality of his death. Jesus gave up his spirit, crying out in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." By committing his spirit to the Father, Jesus demonstrates his trust in God's plan and his voluntary surrender, fulfilling his role as the obedient Son. This also serves as an example for believers on how to approach death, with faith and trust in God. After Jesus spoke those final words from the cross, he breathed his last breath. At that moment, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The veil, once believed to be the only pathway to God, has now been torn in two pieces from the top all the way to the bottom. This signifies that Jesus' sacrifice was a sufficient atonement for sins, allowing all people, Jew and Gentile alike, direct access to God through faith in Jesus.
During Jesus' final hour on the cross, he looked at the centurion for just a moment. The Roman soldier had seen the purest eyes he'd ever seen. As the hours wore on, the centurion found himself looking more and more at the one on the center of the cross. He was perplexed. He didn't know what to do with the darkness. The soldier walked toward the cross. He stood and he fell again. The ground was shaken gently, at first, and then violently. He fell at the foot of the cross. He looked up into the face of this one near death. The king looked down at him, crusty old centurion. Jesus' eyes were afire. They were the eyes of God. He then hears the final words of Jesus. Had the centurion not said it, the soldiers would have. Had the centurion not said it, the rocks would have. As would have the angels, the stars, even the demons. But he did say it. It fell to the nameless foreigner to state what they all knew. Surely this man was the Son of God.
He became sin, who knew no sin, that we might become his righteousness. He humbled himself and carried the cross. Love so amazing, love so amazing. Jesus Messiah, name above all names, blessed Redeemer, Emmanuel, the rescue for sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. His body the bread, his blood the wine, broken and poured out, all for love. The whole earth trembled, and the veil was torn. Love so amazing, love so amazing, yeah. Jesus Messiah, name above all names, blessed Redeemer, Emmanuel, the rescue for sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. All our hope is in you. All our hope is in you. All glory to you, God, the light of the world, Jesus Messiah, name above all names, blessed Redeemer, Emmanuel, the rescue for sinners, the ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. Jesus Messiah, Lord of all.
6 hours, one Friday. 6 hours that jut up on the plain of human history like Mount Everest in a desert. 6 hours that have been deciphered dissected, and debated for 2,000 years. What do these 6 hours signify? What does that Friday mean? For the life blackened with failure, the Friday means forgiveness. For the heart scarred with futility, that Friday means purpose. For the soul looking into this side of the tunnel of death, that Friday means deliverance. 6 hours, one Friday. Does death have the last word? I can see Jesus wink as he gives the answer, not on your life.
I know who I am, 'cause I know who you are. The cross of salvation was only the start. Now I am chosen, free and forgiven. I have a future, and it's worth living. I wasn't made to be tending a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for so why would I fake that in my shame when I found to grace is running my way? I know I am yours, and I was made for I know who I am, 'cause I know who you are. The cross of salvation was only the start. Now I am chosen, free and forgiven. I have a future, and it's worth living. I wasn't made to be tending a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made Why would I fake that in my shame when I found to grace is running my way? I know I am yours, and I was made You've called out my name, so I'll sing out your praise. You bury my past, I'm not going back. I wasn't made to be tending a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for more.
The cross. It was meant to horrify the world. It was meant for humiliation. It was meant to last for days. It was meant for slow asphyxiation. It was meant to prolong torture. It was the Roman soldier's job. It was meant to be used by Caesar, but instead, it was used by God. It was meant to stop a movement, but instead, it became the way. It was meant to act on fear, but instead, it awakened faith. It was meant to be vicious and violent, but instead, it became our peace. It was meant to uproot hope, but instead, it became the seed. It was meant to punish captives, but instead, it unleashed freedom. It was meant to build up Rome, but instead, it built God's kingdom. It was meant to discourage rebels. It was meant to stop insurrection. It was meant to put down Jesus, but instead it set up his resurrection. It was meant to jeer and mock him, but instead it was his glory. It was meant to erase a chapter, but instead it became the story. It was meant to hold up convicts, but instead it raised up a king. It was meant to shut our mouth, but instead it's why we sing. It was meant to be a judgment, but instead it became our mercy. It's why the song of heaven is the Lamb is worthy. It was meant to kill an enemy, crush dissenters and diversion, but instead it became the banner of God's love for every person. It was meant to be appalling, nailing hands and feet to wood. It was meant to be used for evil, but instead it was used for good. It was meant to be a symbol of God's assassination, but instead it became the symbol of Jesus' invitation. Come to the cross. Instead of sin and stain, you are meant to be made clean. Instead of being forgotten, you are meant to know you're seen. Instead of being ashamed, you can leave behind your guilt. Instead of feeling empty, you were meant to be fulfilled. Instead of being broken, you are meant to be made whole. Here, Calvary is calling. It beckons you. Behold, come to the cross. Instead of being an accident, you have a purpose and a plan. Instead of being abandoned, you were chosen by his hand. For all who've said I can't, God has said I can. No matter what you've done, the invitation stands. Come to the cross. Instead of being doubtful, you are meant to know your Father. You are meant to be his son, and you are meant to be his daughter. You were cherished from the start. You are always in the picture. Instead of being a victim, you are meant to be a victor. The result of Jesus' blood, salvation has arrived. Instead of being dead, you are meant to be alive. The cross. It was meant to signal death, but instead, it's a sign of living. It was meant to be the end, but instead, it's our beginning.